What's this in the background?
Okay.
We should be behind the blue curtain. Let's make sure that we're live here. All right, we're live there. And we're gonna hit the blue button. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango,
and I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk about whatever we want to talk about. And before you do that, Buddy, why don't you let folks know what it is we do on this podcast?
This podcast, we talk about games. You know, we talk about games. It has been a couple weeks. It's been 2 weeks since we did an episode.
Yeah.
Because neither of us have seen the Marvels, which I guess we kind of have to see it. By the way,
Yeah.
Did you know that it's like ending? It's like box office run. It's like the first flop in Marvel history.
I mean, it's the first like. It's got to be like by some metric, right? Like I'm sure there's been flops with like movies that have failed to make back their money before this, right? Like more Marvel movies. It's like the first like epic flop maybe or something like that.
Yeah, it is the first one that has really sort of completely collapsed at the box office, right? It had a pretty good opening weekend, and then it just completely, face planted into the dirt. So I don't know. We'll have to get there. We'll have to go figure this out, I guess. But for now, we have lots of other things to talk about.
Yeah.
Including, I don't know. What do you want to start with? What do you want?
Well, since we didn't do the movies, we didn't do the Marvels. You saw Five Nights at Freddy. I saw Thanksgiving, which is the name of a horror film that came out on Thanksgiving by Eli Roth. Do you want to talk about those first? You want to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's?
Five Nights at Freddy's is really interesting to me. This movie made $1 gazillion. Okay. And I think no one expected it to, which I understand that it's really hard to tell someone that the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is going to be like a huge blockbuster. Now, it is not like the biggest movie of...
One second. Yeah. I am so sorry. I'm connected to a VPN, which I don't think is affecting our ability to stream, but I think it'll have bad stuff. So we might just want to make sure we survive through this. Hold on, I'm waiting for us to come back on the other side. You know what? I might toggle the stream. That's probably the thing to do. Oh boy. I think.
Do we fuck ourselves?
No, I think we might be good. I think what happened is that the YouTube side needed to stop streaming. So we're back. Sorry about that, folks at home. Hopefully, if you're listening, I will have remembered to cut this out. But anyway, keep talking about Five Nights at Freddy's, please.
Okay, so Five Nights at Freddy's comes out. It is a huge smash hit, right? It had a budget that's pretty small. It was like $15 million or something like that. Made like $100 million in its first like weekend and a bunch of money afterwards. This is really an eye-opening, in my opinion, moment, I think, for folks when it comes to the financial viability of video game movies, because we have not had the anomalous hit. We have had the pattern making a hit. The pattern or the anomaly is Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers earlier this year comes out, also makes a bunch of money, but that's just a one-off, right? That could be a fluke. But when you have Super Mario Brothers and Five Nights come out and they are both huge releases, I think that's the thing that makes a difference. Which to me is the most interesting story when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's. It actually has very little to do with the movie itself. Frankly, the movie is sort of dog shit. It is more dog shit than anyone I have really ever seen who understands both the Five Nights at Freddy's lore and sort of movies. So, like most people are either bought into Five Nights at Freddy's lore and they think the movie is good because it essentially just has like a lot of shout outs. It's sort of like Solo in that way, right? Like
Fan
it just has like
service.
a lot of fan service shout outs to like lore shit. Um but like
Or
the
lore
movie actually
YouTubers. I saw the Matt Pat clip.
yeah, exactly. And it's like I like that shit. I have watched all of those MatPat videos a million times. I think that they're super fun and engaging. You know, watching the process of MatPat or even just like the whole community kind of uncover the story in sort of a historiography, archaeology uh kind of way is incredibly fun, incredibly engaging stuff, right? I think this is the core of what appeals about Five Nights at Freddy's. Um, the movie doesn't capture really any of that at all. It's very sort of like basic, but it also just like doesn't make sense on its face, and it's really muted by how PG-13 it is. It's really hard to make a horror movie where you can't have kind of like like gore and
And blood.
blood and and like viscera and stuff like that. And one of the complicated things about the Five Nights franchise is that it also doesn't have that stuff, right? It is a very PG-13 kind of like game, but that also leaves the horror implied, right? So for instance, in the first game, you hear a guy tell you that when the animatronics find you, they are going to stuff you into an animatronic suit, right? That's the thing. In the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's, you have endoskeletons, which are like the under, like the chassis or whatever, and then you have the suits, which is like the stuff that goes on top of an endoskeleton. Any endoskeleton can go in any suit, kind of thing. And the idea is when the animatronics see you at night, they think that you are an empty endoskeleton, and so they forcibly put you into they crunch you into the suit, basically. um that's horrific, that's horrifying, but you never see that shit, right? It's that doesn't really like happen on screen. It also doesn't really happen in the Five Nights movie, but like at the same time, uh
I
the
think
Five Nights movie has these like graphic but not graphic kills that are just like it's very like incongruous, basically.
yeah. So I think part of the problem too is like beyond what you described is that this is I think a problem with like um horror game will be a problem with horror game adaptations, especially once they're kind of like solo horror game adaptations, right? Like you're a single character. Is in the game when you fail, the bad thing happens, right? You could theoretically play an animation for that, but canonically, right, by the story, none of that ever happens because the player wins, right?
Mhm.
So like if at least as I understand the Five Nights at Freddy's game, if you played like the Five Nights at Freddy's game as a movie and just like played like a strict adaptation, there would be no kills because the night security guard does the doors right, right? Like he
Yeah.
doesn't die, right? Like
And also, you never see like you get the jump scare, which is the animatronic grabbing you, but then the game that's
yeah,
game
cuts to
over.
black. Yeah, yeah.
Cut to black, so you never really get like the other end of that. I think a lot of the horror in Five Nights at Freddy's comes out of the like the
Tension.
psychological mystery kind of it.
Mm.
Yeah, it is very like tense, but it's like as you uncover the story of these child murders, right? It is about the sort of dread involved in it. And also kind of the like implications of it. So for instance, in one of the later games, there's a moment of that game where you're playing a mini game, and the mini game I think is called Midnight Motorist. And it is a car driving sort of simulator. You're driving a car through sort of a maze of highways, right? Um, the thing that makes Midnight Motorist scary is when you first start playing the game, you're driving the car, right? And every once in a while, a little flash of a light, like somebody taking a picture and like the flash bulb going off, will illuminate on sort of the, like an arcade cabinet will have like a glass face.
Yeah.
On like the surface of the arcade cabinet, you'll see the picture of a girl, of a little girl, like a little girl's face. And she's smiling, she's having a good time. The next time you see the little girl, she's sad, right? and the third, and that's like the next time you play the game. You play the first game, this happens. You play the game the second time, this new thing happens. When you play the game the third time, she's crying, and there's a guy in the golden bunny suit, which is like the murder. It's the murderer in all these Five Nights at Freddy's. Is behind her, and I think the fourth time you play the game, or maybe I'm getting the numbers wrong, and then the fourth time you play the game, you all of the cars are replaced with like a fucked up pixelated dead dog. Okay, and then you dig into sort of the lore and the secrets, and you find out that this little girl's dog died. And the thing that the guy William Afton in the bunny suit does is he tells her that he can fix her dog, right? That he can bring her dog back to life, that he can make her dog better. And that is like the first murder in like these Five Nights at Freddy's murders, right? You don't see that murder play out, but just like imagine how unsettling that is to be like playing a cute racy game, and then just like slowly it like morphs out from under you. That's the stuff that makes Five Nights at Freddy's like good horror, right? And the movie just has like zero, none of it at all, basically. Also, just like the plot makes truly zero sense. Fundamental pieces of the story are obfuscated, or to the best of my knowledge, not even there. In order to sort of like answer, kind of like we talked about Patrick H. Williams's "Shut Up About Plot Holes" video.
Yeah.
I think that video is good, and I appreciate Patrick. I think that he makes good arguments in that video, and that in general we should be pretty accepting of sort of the bigger implications of the world outside of the video, and that stuff happens a lot of the time. It's not a plot hole, you just kind of have a little imagination. There are like a dozen true gaping plot holes in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie that make zero sense on its face, and I think this is what makes the movie kind of like so bad.
Do they make sense if you know that, like, if you know the story, like, if you're like a fan that knows all the lore, and like
maybe you would cut down on half of them. You would say that I know the lore, so half of these make sense. Like, so for instance, there's this part at the end where the killer, so the other thing about the suits is that the suits have these things called spring locks, which lock the suit to the endoskeleton. But the suit can also be worn. You can disengage the spring locks, and the suit can be worn by people, right? So it is both a suit and an animatronic, right?
Right.
The way that the murderer is killed is that he's wearing this golden bunny suit, and the spring locks fire with him inside of the suit, and they crunch up his whole body. They all, you watch them, they snap shut, and it's like gruesome or whatever. And he says this thing. He says, he says, I'm coming back. I always come back. And in the games, he also says this is like his famous quote. He says this for a very specific reason. We fight, you sort of fight him in one game, but then the place where he's in burns down, and he shows up later in another game, and he says, and then when you kill him the second time, he says, I'm gonna come back. I always come back, right? But in the movie, that line makes zero sense. He's never gone away. He was never caught in the first place, right? He was never killed. There was nothing to stop him from that. So when the spring locks are firing and he says, I'm coming back, I always come back, that's a line that you would understand is his trademark line, but it makes no sense in the movie itself, right? It's like a complete non sequitur, essentially, outside of the fact that I guess he's dying and he's,
like, because like presumably the first time he dies is like, he doesn't know that he's gonna come back, right? Like, like this is like the weird mystical bullshit part of the lore, right? Like the
and it's like, and the word "I always come back" implies that he's done this before, but he never went anywhere the first time. So it's just like that makes zero sense, right? But it's just like raw, like baseline plot mechanics make zero sense. And there's also just like a lot of stuff that truly boggles the imagination, in terms of like, oh God, like it's so fucking weird and stupid that I can't even. It's this guy he lives in a town which is okay. The story of the movie is his little brother has been kidnapped and killed. Um, his little brother has been kidnapped and killed and was murdered as a kid. Um, yeah, man, where do I even go from this? Okay, he's murdered as a kid. He moves and he has his younger sister. Okay, and he's taking care of his younger sister. And he needs a job. He accepts a job as a nighttime security officer at the Five Nights place. He accepts a job from the guy who you will later learn murdered his little brother, okay? And then he meets a cop who you will later learn is the murderer's daughter who knew about the murders that her father was committing and is also on the beat of the pizzeria, right? And it's just like it's just this wild set of coincidences, essentially. That I don't know. It just like makes I don't know. It just like makes.
Okay, interesting. I guess, but it did well, so we'll probably get another
Yeah,
one, maybe.
we'll probably get another one, and I'm gonna keep watching these videos. Like I said, I think Five Nights at Freddy's is really interesting. I think it's really evocative, and I'm just like really connected to sort of seeing how it plays out, kind of passively from on high. Because I don't know, kids love this shit, I guess. Anyway, that's it. That's Five Nights at Freddy's. You should watch it sometime. Let me know your thoughts. Uh, we'll take it from there. It is on. It is on a streaming service. It's on Peacock. I think
Okay.
Paramount Plus, one of those.
Oh, I've got one of those through like my cable provider. So I'll maybe watch it, or maybe I won't. Anyway, I watched a movie that is very stupid. It's called Thanksgiving. The subtitle is "There Will Be No Leftovers." Um, the basic, I mean, I guess mild spoilers for this dumb movie. It's an Eli Roth slasher fic. Um, I'm pretty sure it wasn't taking itself seriously, so there's a little bit more to be forgiven here. The plot is this movie is Boston as fuck. Everybody's got like super thick Boston accents. And it's very stupid. But like, so the plot is that the rich guy in town owns it's called like Buy Rate or something. It's like a big store that's having a big Black Friday sale. But they're opening on Thanksgiving, right? And so a ton of people have shown up to get in the store, like kind of like, I don't think it happens as much anymore because of like internet shopping, but like, I don't know if you ever did this when you were a kid, like people would line up at like 6 a.m. and like, like crush each other, right, to like get in on like Black Friday, right? So that's the kind of like, people are lined up waiting for the store to open at 6 p.m. on Thursday of Thanksgiving. And the daughter of the guy who owns the store, she's like with her friends, and like one of her friends needs like a new cell phone because he like got into a fight and the screen got cracked or something. So she lets them into the store early. And they kind of taunt the people outside because like it was the people. The details are not important, but anyway, this causes a stampede which kills several people. Right. This is like your setup, and then the next year, all the people involved like start to die, and this is your setup, right? It's a guy dressed up as I think the founder of Plymouth. It looks kind of like a Guy Fawkes mask, but it's like a pilgrim hat and like a fake face mask, and this person is killing a bunch of people, and it's like, who's the guy that did it? You've got a couple of red herrings, right? And it's none of the people that like you would reasonably expect. It's for like a it's a very stupid kind of plot line, but it's got some fun, gory kills. It doesn't take itself too seriously. One of the minor spoilers for this movie. In the end scene, one of the characters ends up trussed up like a turkey and put in an oven and gets served to some of the other characters. Very kind of ghoulish, terrifying stuff, right? But it's super dumb and it's super goofy, and it was an okay way to burn 90 minutes. Uh, so part of the thing here is that for various reasons, my family ended up doing our Thanksgiving dinner on Black Friday, and so on Thanksgiving, me and my girlfriend didn't have a ton to do because, like, most of the shops were closed, but the theater was open, which was a little bit funny going into this movie, where ostensibly the part of the message is like you shouldn't open shit on Thanksgiving, right? Like let people, and so it's kind of like, oh, huh. Well, I guess I'm gonna sit here and watch this movie telling me not to do the thing that I didn't want to do. Um, but it was like I said, it was an okay way to burn some time. The theater crowd, we were not the only people there. There was a guy there with his disabled adult son, and then there was got kind of that movie experience where someone in the back row is like, "Oh no, don't go in there!" Right, like that kind of thing, which is like
Yeah.
perfect for this movie, right? It's exactly that stupid. So
Yeah, funnily enough, I also had no Thanksgiving, but like Black Friday was our thing because we ended up driving down to like San Diego. Did you? I'm sorry, I don't want to cut this off. What was there anybody that like was notable, or like is there anything notable in the construction of this Thanksgiving movie? Where did it come from?
I mean, Eli Roth is the director, and something is, I will try and put a link in the description, but one of the girl main characters, like she's not like the main character, is like an Instagram influencer, and she did a video for like a go watch Thanksgiving Twitter video, but it's like it's like 2008 bottled in a 90-second video. I need to find this.
Oh my God! Wait! This is insane! I can't believe this is real. Did you ever watch the movie Grindhouse?
No.
Okay, Grindhouse is a movie directed by Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. Do you know who
Right.
Robert Rodriguez is? Yeah, he later became the Spy Kids guy, right? He's, in my opinion, the stuff that he's like great and crazy for. It's like Sin City is he made the Desperado trilogy, the one Once Upon a Time in Mexico, Desperado. Wasn't there another one? El Mariachi. Okay, yeah. It's the guy who carries around the guitar case, but it's actually like got guns.
Right.
That's like Robert Rodriguez. He's just like a famous guy from the 90s independent cinema. They made a movie called Grindhouse, which is a double feature of two sort of half movies. One of them called Planet Terror, about a woman with the
machine
an
gun leg.
M16 for a leg. Yeah, I think that was called Death Proof. But as part of it, there are also a bunch of trailers for movies that do not exist. Okay, but some of them you might have heard of. You know, Machete.
Yeah. With what's his nuts?
Yeah, Danny Trejo.
Yeah.
That's a movie that was a trailer for Grindhouse. Hobo with a Shotgun was a trailer for Grindhouse. Thanksgiving, I didn't realize this at the time.
Oh, is a
movie, is one of the trailers from Grindhouse. That is so cool. I am so glad I asked that question and looked it up. I didn't know this answer until I decided to look into it. Because yeah.
So the TikToker is Addison Rae.
Okay.
And I sent it to you. Let's see if I can actually throw this up relatively quick, because this video is like everything that's like you. Okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to click on it. But this video is like 2008, like in a bottle. Like I probably can't play it because it'll probably get copyright struck, because it's like some song from like it is just, I'm gonna encourage everybody to go watch it. I will make sure to post it in the description. It is like, if you were alive, like if you were our age basically in 2008, then this will be like, oh, this feels like high school, right? Or like, oh, this feels like college if you're slightly older, right? Like
okay, I have never heard of Addison Rae, but I actually think that's probably untrue. I think I have heard of Addison.
Yeah,
And I've just been like, who's that? But now that I see that she's the fourth most popular TikToker in the world, I guess I understand.
yeah. No, when I was looking at, so I thought I recognized one of the other characters, which turns out no, he's not been in anything else. But like as I was looking through, it was like Addison Wright. I recognized that name, but not in a way that I know. And then like went through it. Huge TikToker. Anyway, very silly movie. If you need to burn some time, it's not a bad thing to have on in the background. Um, if you want like classics horror schlock, right? And to your point, right? Like Eli Roth directed this. He's friends with Quentin Tarantino from he's the Bear Jew in Inglourious Bastards.
The best of the Quentin Tarantino movies. That's my actually that's not true. I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it used to be the best of the Quentin Tarantino movies was Inglourious Bastards.
I need to watch the full canon because I have not watched Reservoir Dogs. And
oh yeah, Reservoir Dogs. Yeah,
good. But Pulp Fiction is also very good, right? Like but there's Quentin Tarantino makes very iconic movies. Is the way to put it? Maybe is he done? Is he said he's done?
No. He said he was good. Okay, a long time ago, he said he was making 10 movies. He was like, "This is a director should have 10 movies. That's it, right?" I don't think that he's actually going to like that. That to me sounds like apocryphal, right? Like, is he really going to not make more than 10 movies because in 2004 he like told some fucking film magazine that he was only 10 or whatever? But technically speaking, it might be like his final. What is his upcoming movie though? I do remember that he God. In 2009, Tarantino said that he planned to retire from filmmaking when he was 60, which is now. I think he's 60 now, in order to focus on writing novels and film literature. The Movie Critic, yes, I do know this, about Pauline Kael, who's a very just like insanely famous like movie critic. This is what everybody thinks is I don't know. This is what everybody thinks his like last movie is going to be. People call it his 10th and final film, but who knows?
Okay.
Honestly, I need to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It was my movie of the year that year.
Yeah, I need to rewatch it too. All right. And so I think that's enough on that movie. You mentioned San Diego. I know that you did some fun stuff in San Diego. Do you want to talk
about
that?
Did you see any boat pics? Do you see my sweet boat pics?
I saw your sweet boat pics.
Yeah, like the whole thing with going to San Diego was honestly super fun. We went to San Diego for my birthday. Rachel took me down there. We stayed at this hotel across the street from San Diego Harbor. There is a museum that I thought was a building, but it turns out it's just a bunch of boats called the American Maritime Museum, or the U.S. Maritime Museum, actually. Which has a number of different boats on its like in its roster, one of which the core museum itself is an old steamboat that has been converted into like a dry dock. It's just sitting still basically, but you can like go all throughout the steamboat. It's a steamboat that was in San Francisco Harbor when the earthquake, the 1903 earthquake and fire happened. And it saved a bunch of people's lives because they all went out on this boat, and the boat just took off and just kind of hung out in the bay, while the fire was sort of like raging and all were like saved or whatever. But it also has like a bunch of cool shit. They have the two big things that we did was, one, we did an event called Boarded, which was like live theater on a ship, okay? Because they have this recreation of this 16th century Spanish galleon that explored up the California coast for the first time, called the San Salvador. There was this, in the age of exploration, there was this Spanish explorer. He essentially, like there was no Panama Canal at the time, and nobody had sailed under the Patagonia, which is like the bottom tip of South America, because Patagonia is like insanely hard to navigate, right? Yeah. Tons and tons of ships have like been wrecked trying to go under the bottom tip of South America. So this guy, he basically made he in I think it was in Guatemala, like modern day Guatemala. Um maybe it was El Salvador or something like that. He basically made a shipyard and a dry dock on the Pacific coast in order to make 3 ships, right, that he could take on a sort of like an exploratory voyage. And he sailed all up the California coast, discovered San Diego Bay for the first time. Just discovered a bunch of stuff kind of connecting it to sort of like the modern European kind of colonized world of, North and South America. And they have a recreation of his galleon. And so what they do is they take you out on this galleon, and then they have this like sort of tacky for kids, but it's like funny just for kids thing, where like pirates board the ship and they take the ship over. They put a bunch of gunpowder in the cannons and they fire the cannons, and it's just like, it's dumb, but it was very fun. It was very cute. They all sang me happy birthday, which was pretty funny.
Was this just for you? Were you like the only person there?
No, it's like a big group of people were there.
Okay.
I had a little costume. I had this like $20 Spirit Halloween pirate costume and hat. And then the second day,
I'm just imagining you standing on the boat and like seeing this pirate jump on the boat and be like, "Look out!" Just like decking like a person, just like throwing them off the boat.
Yeah, and then the second day we went out on a sailing boat called the Californian, which is do you know about this revenue? Have you ever heard of revenue cutters? It's like a weird little piece of American history I've never heard of before.
No.
Okay, so a revenue cutter is the actual it's like the beginnings of the IRS. Because in the olden days, there was no income or property tax. There were only import and export tariffs, right? The way the United States government funded itself was through import and export tariffs. And so
just as a historical point, income tax was constitutionally illegal until they passed an amendment to make it legal. But anyway,
yeah,
continue.
And so smuggling and doing things to try and get out, to get stuff to the United States or to get stuff to England or wherever else was huge at the time. Because it was the way that you would dodge import and export. It's the way you would dodge import and export tax. And so revenue cutters are these boats that the United States government made and was essentially, they were operated by the IRS, which at the time was a military wing. It was before it was technically the IRS. And they would just like go
IRS
and hunt down.
Agents are still armed, so there's that.
True. Yeah. And so they would just go and they would hunt down these smugglers, because these boats are super low to the ground, they're super fast, and they have these huge sails. The Californian is the state boat of California. Or the state sailing ship of California. And there are just these, honestly, it is the cutest thing. It is just like, how you talk about your like minis dads that like, it's those
Historical
guys,
miniatures.
but for boats, basically. Right. They will just say the most boat shit that you've ever heard in your life. And you can tell that like, they don't need to say that, right? They don't actually need to like give orders in traditional like boat speak or whatever, but they're having a great time doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, like that's like the point is in the doing, right? Like it's funny, right? We were talking before about like there's some controversy around Internet Historian, the YouTuber, but he recently put out a video about wine that like a lot of it is kind of like making fun of like people who do wine tasting, but at the end of it he's like, hey, as much as I've been dumping on them, it's a fun thing to do, right? You could buy a pre-painted Warhammer miniature, but like the fun is in the doing, right? It's a similar type of thing, right? Like the fun is in the doing and doing it right.
Frankly, it reminds me almost a lot of D&D. It is or like LARPing, right? One of the things that when we went to Gen Con that one that I said was so fun about the LARP is you're in a group. It is sort of a willful mass hysteria is actually how I would describe it. You and a group of people all get together and you collectively pretend that you're not in the basement of the Marriott in Indianapolis. You're Space Marines and you're landing on an uncharted planet that is overrun with terrible lizard creatures that are all like a ravenous, devouring swarm hive, right? The same thing is sort of true for this boat shit, right? These sailing dads, they just want to LARP being sailors. Okay, that's all that they want. And so, you know, talking about port starboard, you know, halyard and the different, you know, Tagarn soul, the topsail, right? Like all this stuff. It's just like that's all it is for them. That was just like the plus, honestly, just like, man, California is like beautiful. The weather is fun. Tacking is super cool. I did some boat stuff in Long Island Sound because my dad had these friends in Connecticut who had a sailing ship there. And we would do stuff, some, you know, like, and not even a ship, just like a tiny little boat. We would do like some boat stuff from time to time. But doing it on this huge ship was actually really cool because you need a bunch of people all do. It's sort of the fun of like raiding. Um, you have the captain in the back, right, who's on the helm, right? You have I guess it's the first mate who has the deck, and he is like giving out orders to people who are on different lines, all related to one sail, making sure that you can tack the boat from one side to the other without anybody getting hurt. But like, you know, everyone's jockeying kind of their own sort of thing. And it was just like, oh, like that's actually really cool and fun, right? Kind of being a part of that whole sort of unit. Anyway, so that was the second day. Like the Californian. And then there's just like a bunch of other boats in their harbor. The cool ones are they have a submarine in there, the USS Dolphin. Did you ever go to the submarine in the Hackensack River, by the way, when you were a kid?
What's the name of it?
Oh God, man, it's gone now.
I probably that sounds familiar. It sounds like a thing I did with the Scouts.
It was the USS Ling. The USS Ling was a naval submarine from World War II that was sailed up the Hackensack River and then sort of, you know, like dry docked there basically. But is it gone now? Oh, it's still there apparently, actually, but the Naval Museum where it was at closed. In January 2007. The museum closed, and so I guess the USS Ling is still there. It's not publicly accessible anymore. In 2018, artifacts from the submarine were stolen, and the Ling was also flooded. Several people were identified in connection with the burglary. Okay, well, whatever the case may be, I went to the USS Ling when I was a little kid, because I thought that shit was cool as fuck.
I think I might have too.
We went there for like a boat thing. There was also a submarine in San Diego, the USS Dolphin, which is the deepest diving submarine in the world. Not like submersible, but like actual, you know, sort of like ship submarine. They had like a Vietnam era swift boat. They had the other super cool one was God, it's not called the Interceptor. What is it called? The HMS Surprise. Have you ever seen the movie Master and Commander?
No.
In the movie Master and Commander, which is like Russell Crowe, it's about like the Napoleonic Wars, like a naval ship in the Napoleonic Wars. They apparently, I didn't even know this at the time, they bought a real English frigate called the HMS Surprise in order to shoot that movie. And that ship was then, I guess, sold or donated to the U.S. Naval History Museum. The U.S. Maritime Museum. And so you can just go there. It's like an accurate, you know, naval frigate from, you know, like English frigate from that time. It's so it's just like, anyway, it's just like a bunch of boats. That's what we really ended up doing.
Very cool.
Boat shit. It's cool.
I'm gonna have a vaguely boat related story in a couple of weeks. I am going to the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. In Boston, yeah. I managed to get apparently the tickets sold out within like an hour, and I managed to snag a couple. So, I will have stories about that. But that sounds super cool. Are you gonna become a boat dad now?
I am strongly considering becoming boat pilled.
Oof. Are you going? You should build your own boat and sail it through the Northwest Passage. Just
oh, that actually would be cool. You know what movie I saw recently? Hold on. I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched like half of it because it's on YouTube for free, and it just came up as part of like my doomed boat scrolling. Um, it is a 2013 movie, directed by J.C. Chandor. Who do you remember the movie that I told you about, Margin Call? That was
Yeah.
like an exceedingly weird movie about the 2008 financial crisis,
Right.
but
Yeah.
essentially from the people who caused the crisis. Um, All Is Lost is a movie directed by the same guy, which is Robert Redford alone. There's like maybe 100 words spoken the entire time. It is about him sailing in the Indian Ocean, and his sailing ship impacts with a floating shipping container, which is apparently a huge thing. Do you know about this?
No.
Yeah, this is a thing I ended up looking to like understand. Um, Shipping containers fall off of cargo ships all the time, and most of the time they are airtight and they're actually buoyant. They're pretty buoyant. Um, and so in the specifically the Pacific Oceans where like most of these are, there are just floating shipping containers all over the place, right? Anyway, the shipping container rams his sailing ship. It causes a huge hole. It starts flooding. All this other stuff. Then there's a huge storm. And it's just like one. It's like a man against nature. You know, one guy trying to survive, sort of thing. It's very cool. It's on YouTube, totally free. Go watch it.
I wonder. Now you've got my brain going. So I wonder what the like because it's international waters. I wonder what the legality of like recovering one of those is, right? Like, can I like, commission a boat and go out and like pick up shipping containers and crack them open and be like, oh boy, 10,000 iPads, I'm rich.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is probably the reason that I got down this train was because a cargo ship docked. I want to say it was like Washington or something. I saw a post on Reddit about it. It's like a cargo ship docked on Reddit, and you can see where rough seas had caused the stacks to topple, right?
Right.
And somebody was just like, "Oh my God, there's going to be like 800 shipping containers just floating out in the ocean," right? And somebody was like, "Yeah, that's the plot of this fucking movie, All Is Lost." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I went to go watch this movie. Oh my God.
What?
There are so many more of these than I thought. There are 20 million shipping containers of different varieties all across the world. That's so many.
Is it 20 million varieties or 20 million total containers?
20 million total containers, yeah. Of like that standard container that
Yeah.
you like know of, basically.
Yeah. No, I know at one point, I think it was Google. Again, disclosure, I work for Google, but not in any capacity related to this. At one point, I don't think it's true anymore. They would like take shipping containers and like build server farms out of them because it was like cheaper to do it that way than to like try and get rid of the shipping container. Um, you could do like retrofit it with like cooling and whatever. Um, but yeah, no, they're like I know that they're huge. That's actually so. Speaking of which, at a company party, I work in the Boston area, and we had a company event at like one of the ports, and like they had like an event space in like an old warehouse, but it's across from a shipyard, and they were actively loading a ship. And so like a bunch of us engineers got like a nerd's knife. We're just sitting there like watching these cranes moving and placing these giant shipping containers like like 30 tall on top of it, and just like thinking about like talking to each other about like the logistics involved. Like it's crazy, right? Like it is you know it's fucking nuts. You don't think about it, but like that this is the way the world works, right? Like
Approximately 12,000 shipping containers are lost. Honestly, the scale, the scale of this truly boggles my mind sometimes.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's that meme, right? Like about I'm sure you've seen it. It's like a photo of a of like a like pears, I think, in fruit or in juice. It's like pears or peaches. And it says it's somebody in the United States, and it says grown in like Argentina and packaged in Thailand. Right? And so and like the map is like, grown in Argentina, is shipped to Thailand to be packaged, and is shipped back to the United States to be sold. And like the economics make sense because cargo ships are super cheap. Thailand apparently eats tons and tons of prepackaged fruit, right? Like much more than we do. So like most of it gets sold there, and it makes more sense to ship it all to Thailand, package it, sell most of it there, but then send a portion of it back across the Pacific to sell in the United States, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just like there are some. I never understood this scale until I moved to California, because in the East Coast, everything is 10 miles apart, which is a relic of sort of the colonial era, where
Right.
towns and cities are typically about 10 miles apart, because that's the amount of time someone can be expected, or the amount that someone could be expected to travel in a day, right? If I am walking or I'm on a horse and I go 10 miles in a day, I'm probably pretty tuckered. And so the idea is that, if you just look around, right, all of these like little towns in Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, right, they're all like 10 miles. California is like the opposite of that, right? California, you could go miles, miles and miles without seeing another like town, right? Or you might see like just like a shop in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, where does like the clerk for this shop like live? And the answer is that person probably lives 30 or 40 miles away, because they just, right, like they have a car, there's a highway, they just drive on the highway. Most of California kind of gets like, outside of obviously stuff in Northern California, there's like gold rush stuff. Most of California sort of comes alive with the advent of the automobile, and modern water infrastructure, right? Being able to essentially make desert cities is something that only has happened in kind of the 20th century, basically. And a thought that occurred to me that sort of like really fucked my brain is just how much open, empty space there is in California, because it's just not true in New Jersey. If I'm going a couple of towns over, which is a pretty common thing, right? I live in Morristown. I want to head over to, I don't know, Randolph, right? Though, like I'm passing by a couple of little towns along the way, right? Or if I'm in Maplewood and I'm going to right, like those are probably 40 miles apart. Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of little towns on the way. But like if I live in Bakersfield and I'm going to go to Fresno, right? There are just going to be parts where I'm driving along a highway and there's nothing to either side of me, or or like it'll be farmland. It's actually very common.
Yeah.
It'll just be like raw farmland for hours and hours and hours. Or I'm sorry, miles and miles and miles. And I don't know, that thought fucks with me. I think about, I've been playing a lot of Stellaris recently, and I think about the Ecumenopolis, okay, which is like the city planet. You can turn a planet into an Ecumenopolis with a special kind of, you invest a bunch of resources into it, and it turns the planet into essentially Coruscant, right? It is the way that Stellaris gamifies Coruscant from Star Wars, right? A planet that is entirely a city. Or Trantor from the Foundation series is also this. And just like thinking of the scale of that truly boggles my mind and is hard to comprehend. Because it's just like the population density is it the amount of people is like you can't
Yeah,
process,
it's
you
like
can't
a
get
hive
that in
city,
your brain.
right? Like
Yeah.
in
Yes.
Warhammer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, just thinking about like, I don't know. I always know that like the I think our brains just like don't handle numbers of people, because like I have seen like large portions of like New York City or Boston or Chicago from the air, and like
Mhm.
all things considered, it really doesn't feel like it's all, or like San Francisco, right? Like it's like I can see the edges of it, right? Like I have, in a very ill-advised move, I once walked from like the northern edge of San Francisco all the way down to um all the way down to like uh out of the city into the North Bay. It's like Culver City, not Culver City. Uh, anyway, the point, there was a theater I was meeting some friends at, and I was like, I can walk this, and I was like, a 7 to 10 mile walk, right? Like like you said, I was pretty pooped by the end of it, but like it's like that's it. That's a coverable distance, but that's like a million people, right? Like in that area, it kind of like defies um intuition, I guess is the way to put it, right? Like the number of people, at least in my mind, the number of people that should fit in the space feels a lot smaller. Like it feels like there should be less people in that space than there actually is. Maybe that's a consequence of like growing up in the suburbs, right? Where like, you know, I know on like this acre there were like 4 people at once, right? With my family, like, you know, the family um growing up, and so it's like my mind is set to like 4 people an acre as reasonable, but it's like, you know, so much more dense than that in the more urban spots, and so much more less than that.
I have Googled this tiny and found a crazy article. I just want to read this out because it is entirely what we're talking about. This is from BBC Science Focus, I guess, which is a, I don't know, like a website or something. And the question is, will the Earth ever become a city planet? And somebody says we're probably not going to have to worry about overpopulation anytime soon. And he says Coruscant, which is the city planet of the Star Wars Galactic Empire, right? Supposedly has a population of 3 trillion people. Okay, 430 times Earth's current population. 3 trillion people. But even this many people wouldn't be enough to create a proper city planet on the planet Earth. Okay? To give all of Earth's landmass the same population density as Tokyo, which would actually make quite a lot of sense. Have you ever seen any Tokyo maps like superpositioned on other stuff? Because those are wild and will also fuck with you. To give all of Earth's landmass the same population density as Tokyo, you would need 895 trillion people, or 300 Coruscants. Even the more pessimistic projections from the UN suggest that the Earth's population will peak at less than 100 billion people by the end of the century. So, spread across all the land area on the planet, that would give the world an average population density lower than that of some random town in New England, or in England, which, like, yeah, okay, that fucks with me.
Yeah, no, this is like the, you know, the Matty Iglesias like 1 billion Americans thing, right? Like, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
we've got the space, right? You know, it's just like apportioned all weird, right? We like parks, I guess.
Listen, I enjoy a good national park. Okay.
Yeah, or you know, parks in like a lot. You know that like government owns, I think, like 80% of the land in Nevada. I want to say.
Yeah, yeah, it's like federal. It's the federal government, and the
Yeah.
Nevada state government really. Apparently, they have all these clashes in court about it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It is funny. Like, so I don't think I've talked much about this on the podcast, but I follow the Supreme Court stuff, and like states will get like with each. So federal government, the state just usually kind of like loses because of the supremacy of the federal government. But like, whenever a state conflicts with another state, the court of original jurisdiction, where it's first heard, is the Supreme Court. And so like, there's always a couple of cases each term that's like Florida getting mad at Georgia because they're like doing something with the water, and the waters flows, like waters of the United States is like a whole area of law because because like the water flows from Georgia through Florida, and the people of Florida are like, our clam harvest is negatively affected by like you know, diverting water to, you know, do irrigation somewhere in Georgia or something like that. So it's always a huge thing.
Yeah, I got really deep into that on the Colorado River because the LA Times did like a huge, not like an expose, but just like a report where basically they were talking about all of the crazy water rights that go into the Colorado River, and how, because it obviously affects a lot of Southern California, because the Colorado River runs essentially right between California and Arizona. But by the time that it gets to California, it dries up kind of completely. And that's before it even, you know, it's supposed to get to Mexico, right? The Colorado River is supposed to get to Mexico and empty out into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, and then there's this also interacts with Native American rights a lot, because like Native Americans typically have like a very permissive right to fish the waters. I don't know if it's universal or if it's just with certain tribes, but like, so there's a question of like how much the EPA can like stop the tribes from doing certain fishing activities, right? Like, for like various good or not reasons. But you know, that's another thing, right? Because like the tribes are like a semi-sovereign. There was a, I can't remember the full context. There was a case last term about where like some act said like all governments, foreign and domestic, and whether or not the Native American, the government of the tribes counted, because they are not they're like quasi foreign, and so they're not foreign or domestic, but they're like a kind of like halfway state. And so this is like a very kind of like, like this is pure like semantics stuff, right? It's like, well, they didn't say that, but like, does the phrase "foreign, all governments, foreign or domestic," encompass the tribes, right? Like,
there's also a question of like diplomacy, right? That was the whole thing that I remember we in high school talked about, like history and like the Native Americans and stuff like that. That the thing that defines a nation state is not sort of it is it's sort of relative, right? It's diplomacy, right? It
Right.
is your ability to engage diplomatically with your peers around the world, right? And Native Americans don't really have that capability, but they do diplomatically like they do diplomatically relate with the United States. When the United States are dealing with Native American nations, they're almost always treaties, right?
Yeah.
In order to kind of describe those relations. And I think that is it was just like, I think it was like an essay I wrote. It's like, are the Native Americans a real tribe? Because you could, or a real nation? Because you could say that, well, no, they don't have this definition because there's no Spanish ambassador to the Navajo Nation, right? But at the same time, when the U.S. deals with the Navajo Nation, they deal with it as if they are dealing with countries. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like one of those things. It's like,
I mean, and it's interesting because you could probably
tough
like,
to parse.
you've probably got a better case today than you did, when you wrote that paper,
Yeah.
because, quite famously, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch is like, this is like his bread and butter. He dealt with it a lot when he was on the Colorado District Court, I think, or that circuit, and so he's very favorable. Like he has a deep understanding of the law, and he tends to be favorable towards them. Like, a couple terms ago, he basically half of Oklahoma basically reverted to tribal land status because it was like part of a treaty that like got challenged in court, and that got cut back for like enforcement reasons because there was like problems about charging crimes and also the composition of the court. So but I don't need to go into the politics of that right now. But like they've got a strong advocate in the judiciary, at least at this point.
Okay, fair enough. Here's my question. For your legal sort of purview, is it okay for Asmongold the streamer, with no intentions of playing on an RPPVP server, to designate that the RPPVP server in the new WoW Classic launch to have a character named Asmongold, I think, on that server, because he got banned for it by Blizzard Entertainment because he didn't have an RP name on an RP PvP server, but the ban got appealed.
Like the real answer is Blizzard writes their terms of service so vague that basically they can be like, they can make up a reason and say, okay, okay, right? It is interesting because terms of service are super broad, but like,
yeah,
basically like consumer reputation and norms keep them from being as extreme, because if you really wanted to like be like a dickbag about it, right? Like you could like cancel everything. And the reason they do this is so like, if Blizzard shuttered for some reason, that they could like discontinue service and not like have outstanding debt to the players that they that paid for like a longer subscription or something. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like, what do I think the right norm is there? I don't know. If you've got Asmongold on stream saying I'm not going to RP on the server, then I think that's fair game. Although I don't know, I'm on an RP PvP server. I don't really RP, right?
You have a good RP name, yeah.
Yeah, no,
I just thought that was like funny because like there were all these arguing this shit in the fucking comments.
yeah.
Like at the end of this day, it's up to Blizzard to make these sorts of things. And I think really what happened is he got mass flagged, right? There were just like a bunch of haters, right, who flagged his name and the automation, because Blizzard will do stuff where they will if a ton of people report something, they will kind of freeze the account and then sort of do enforcement later, just to like
Yeah, it's like a rapid response thing. Yeah, I mean, but like, outside in a vacuum, right? If I didn't know who Asmongold was, right? Asmongold is not a bad RP name, right?
Yeah.
Like I could see that being like a real RP name.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of streamers like have that. Like you could get like Pokimane or
Yeah,
even like Hasanabi or
I
like
would say like
the
Pokemon's a little bit pushing it just because it's clearly a play on Pokemon, right? Rather than like, like its own name, right?
sure.
But yeah,
But yeah. Anyway, that's I guess a complicated segue to the thing I have been doing with my
well,
week, which is playing
but
WoW Classic season of just.
but before you
I'm
get
sorry,
to that,
yeah.
because since we're heading towards the back half, I do want to hit the one other big thing I did this week, which is go to PAX Unplugged.
Oh yeah, tell me all about it.
Okay, so Philadelphia is terrible. Always is, always will be. It wasn't particularly terrible this time. It's just kind of like, it was the worst PAX experience I have had. Not to say it was bad, right? There were a couple of things that were aggravating, but what it really made me appreciate is how well run Gen Con is. Because I think part of the problem here is that PAX East and West are like primarily video game events, and a lot of what you do is you there are some panels, but like they're typically it's not like, so you have to line up for some of them, but they're like kind of like high demand events. But like usually you're like standing in line at like a booth on the exhibition floor, right? Like if I'm going to PAX, it's like go to say the Yakapara booth and play the Estrella demo, right?
Sure.
At a tabletop gaming convention, that is significantly different, right? Like there's an amount of time I will spend wandering the exhibition hall floor, but I probably want to do like pre-scheduled events, right? The way that Gen Con handles this is for everything, not just kind of like the high demand ones. They will sell you tickets. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they cost you a couple of bucks, but they do that like 3 months before Gen Con happens. You set up your shopping cart, you hit a button, and you get your events, and you know exactly what you're going to do. Do you know what PAX does? What PAX Unplugged does? I assume this is true for the other ones, but it's less demand. The 8 a.m. the day of, you have to click a fucking button and be the first person to like get it. Yeah. And so, it's like a fucking madhouse. And it is totally impractical. Basically all the seats fill for all the events, especially like there are I looked at, I was up on time. I grabbed a couple of events. I played a couple of different games. I went and looked. It was like, I got it my 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. event. It was like, I looked at like, oh, maybe I'll do something this afternoon. Everything was filled except for there were a couple slots open on like the miniatures game where you brought your own army, right? And obviously I'm not prepared to do that. So, it's like, those were the only things that were open. It's just kind of like, how are you supposed, like, if you want to do 2 things in a day, you're probably not going to be able to, because like all the slots are going to be filled out, right? Like you have to like pick something and hope to get it. And then on top of that, they don't have like a super good way to like target individual events. I played, the group that was putting it on is called Gehenna Games. They were very well done. I got the same dungeon master both times. I will actually give him a shout out in a second because he was a good dungeon master. Basically I signed up for like 2 pools of games, and I had to show up on foot and check in to get a game, right? Like I signed up for a World of Darkness block, and when I got there, the only slots left were for Hunter the Reckoning. I was happy to play Hunter the Reckoning. I really liked it, but I couldn't even like target vampire or werewolf if I wanted to. I had to not only hit it at 8 o'clock, but also get to the door on time. And also on top of that, this aggravated me more than anything else. The way the con is set up is the Pennsylvania Convention Center has an entrance that's like 2 blocks away from the main body of the convention center. You end up going over, it's called the Reading Terminal Market. You go over the top of it, like you walk up the stairs, you go over the top of it. That's where all the security booths are. And then you walk over, and then you walk back down the stairs, right? And so my hotel was like attached to the convention center, but they weren't letting people in through it. So I'd walk past a set of doors that said they wouldn't open until 11, right? When they had like less volume. And then I would be like, okay. And I would walk south 2 blocks. I don't know if it was south, but I would walk 2 blocks away and go up the set of stairs. And by the time I got back to where I was, they'd have opened the door like, 2 hours early, right? It was just like super frustrating. There's also like Gen Con doesn't have like real security, right? Like they made us go through like metal detectors. They always do at PAX, and it's like, I don't know. Maybe it's because Indianapolis doesn't care as much, but like they let people walk the halls in between the convention, they let people walk the convention center hall without a badge, and like they just like won't let you play any games or go into the exhibition hall, which I think is a much superior model, right? Like again, made me appreciate PAX or not PAX, Gen Con so much more, just because this game was, or this con was just like, felt like it was a little disheveled. It was trying to put the wrong model on the wrong thing. But the games I played were Ragnarok, or Gods of Metal Ragnarok, which I think you would have appreciated the theming of at least. Imagine we played Mask of the Luchador at Gen Con. It's kind of like, imagine like the similar kind of like take a bunch of tropes from this pop culture thing, in this case, metal, and turn it into an RPG. Mechanics were a little wonky, but the GM was good. And then I played Hunter the Reckoning, which is a super fun thing. It's like it's the World of Darkness. It's the same world as Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf, the Awakening, I think. But you're normal humans, and you have to like deal with supernatural stuff. But I did want to shout out the GM. I had the same GM for both games. He is part of a group on YouTube called The Emporium for Wayward Gamers. I will put links. They have a YouTube, they have a Twitch, and he is Neophet. I will put links in the description. I just want to give him a shout out, and if you like small creators, I guess go check them out. But yeah, you were going to talk about. One other thing. I know this isn't April Fool's yet, but I think Philly cheesesteaks are overrated. In the sense.
Okay. Well, how do you feel about do you know about true Philly cheesesteaks with cheese whiz?
Whiz or whatever. Yeah.
My father-in-law is from Philadelphia, and so when we'll talk about cheese whiz, like, there's a difference between a fake Philly cheesesteak, which just has whatever cheese, provolone, Swiss, whatever, and a true Philly cheesesteak where the cheese is cheese whiz.
I mean, the standard options are American, provolone, and cheese whiz, and I like provolone, so I usually get provolone. But I also think that like cheesesteaks, my fundamental take is that a cheesesteak is not like special, right? Like I can make just as good a cheesesteak in my kitchen upstairs as I can get in Philadelphia, right? And it's not a thing like, getting an authentic one doesn't improve the quality by any measurable margin. That is
okay. Well, you heard it here first. We're gonna have to talk about, I don't know, cheesesteak on the next Some Derps Talk About Food.
Do you have an opinion about cheesesteaks, or you got to hold it back?
I like cheesesteaks just fine. I think cheesesteaks are pretty trashy.
Like Philadelphia.
I eat a cheesesteak when I feel gross and I just want to eat garbage, but whatever. Like that's true for
you just like sit down at your table in just like a wife beater, nothing else, wife beater and shorts, just like, oh my god, I have my cheese.
Like that. It's like, I don't know. There's some foods that I think are classier, or like some regional foods, I guess I would say, that are like classier. Like a bagel is classier. A bagel at like a Jewish deli or something, right? Like a boiled New York bagel. That is like a classy sort of regional food. Not like classy in the sense of like high dining, right? It's not like a filet mignon or whatever, but it's like I don't know. It doesn't make me feel like trash to eat it. I feel like fucking garbage when I eat a cheesesteak. I just think it is like shoveling that stuff into my gullet, basically.
Have you ever had an Italian hot dog?
The one that's like with the in the
bread.
bun.
Yeah. Jimmy Buff's, this is the famous one, because like that's like, I think that's like a very unique thing. Like I think that's like unique and delicious thing, but it's definitely trash food, right?
Yeah,
it's definitely like.
I mean, that's true for like Taylor ham, right? Like I love Taylor ham. We've talked about Taylor ham, egg, and cheese, but Taylor ham is just salt, right? Like you know what I mean?
Taylor ham is basically Spam, but like regional to New Jersey. But yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know. That's my opinion about a Philly cheesesteak. If I'm having a bad day, okay, I'm gonna eat a Philly cheesesteak to feel a little better about myself, just because it's tasty, but it's garbage.
Fair enough. Anyway, you were going to talk about WoW. I'm
I
sorry.
was going to talk about WoW Season of Discovery. Okay, so I talked about this at BlizzCon, and it has arrived. So here's the story with WoW Classic Season of Discovery. In WoW, they released WoW Classic, the original version, no changes, right? Hashtag no changes, something that the community sort of asked for. Ended up spawning a bunch of really dubious, I don't want to say illegitimate behavior. It's not really illegitimate, but right, like it's just like that game functioning in a modern context makes for an incredibly warped sort of gameplay experience, and a lot of changes ended up hitting the game. I'm sorry, a lot of differences ended up hitting the game because of how people were interfacing with a 2004 product in 2019, right? This is the year that WoW Classic releases. They eventually do Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King. Both of these kind of come pretty quickly, right? Kind of back to back. And in the meantime, they keep that WoW Classic sort of thing alive with WoW Classic Season of Mastery. Season of Mastery is like some changes, right? Where they kind of take a look at sort of the way that some basic stuff happens in, you know, like the overall sort of like Warcraft model, and make some changes just kind of for balance reasons, for, you know, just to like give people sort of an extra level sort of like viability that they don't get to enjoy, right? That kind of thing. Then we get WoW Classic Hardcore, right? Where, you know, it's like Diablo. If you die in game, you die forever,
In real life.
right? Yeah, you die. Yeah, you die in real life. Classic Hardcore was people seem to go really crazy for it. Honestly, Twitch streamers apparently went super crazy for it. Huge Twitch streamers who aren't normally like WoW affiliated. XQC has been a WoW Classic hardcore gamer. That giant thing is never not going to be fucking funny. And then the most recent iteration is called Season of Discovery. Now, here are the sort of rules and goals of Seasons of Discovery. WoW Classic Season of Discovery caps the level at 25, right? It remakes the dungeon Black Fathom Depths, right, BFD, to be a 10-man raid environment, including new like items and all this other sort of shit. And it introduces a new system called runes. Okay, and here's how runes work. You have your gear. You have a rune. You can engrave a rune for a gear slot on that slot of gear. So if I have a leg rune that says whatever, I can engrave that leg rune on my legs, and then I can change that engraving kind of way, right? It's like switching talents in retail. You can just change your sort of. Every class gets 12 runes spread through hands, chest, and legs, I think. And like runes are mutually exclusive. You can't have 2 leg runes. You can only do 1 rune kind of thing. And the runes themselves typically pull from sort of modern WoW for inspiration, right? So the best example of this might be paladins, who famously auto attack, right? Like that's all that they do in Classic. There's no sort of rotation to paladins outside of just keep your steel up and auto attack, right? Paladins get Crusader Strike. They get a button to press that deals damage. Okay, cool, very fun, right? And then a bunch of other stuff, right? So affliction warlocks will get haunt, which is like the affliction warlock ability. You put haunt on a target and it, you know, kind of soaks up a bunch of extra, like it amplifies your dot damage basically. Warlocks will also get chaos bolt, right? Which is the big warlock spell for destruction warlocks. Chaos bolt is, you know, like the most powerful spell in the game. It always penetrates all sort of like resistance, this sort of stuff. So generally speaking, but then there's also like passive effects, right? Warriors have an ability that says every time a target takes bleed damage, you gain 3 rage. Okay, cool. Yeah, like now my warrior is I can fund him with tons and tons of rage gain all the time, all that stuff, right? But the most interesting thing about the rune system is the way you acquire runes. So the first rune you get is typically just like a basic quest to introduce you to the system. You know, mine for warriors was go to the back of this mine, there's a chest, loot the chest, there's a rune inside, right? And it gives you the very first rune of the game, essentially. For warriors, this is Victory Rush. But the interesting thing is when you start getting out from there, and all of the runes are these like little secrets dotted throughout the map. I want to talk about some of them, but I also sort of like don't want to
spoil them.
I don't want to spoil it, because part of what has been so fun about Classic Season of Discovery is uncovering the way to get these runes individually, right? All of the runes that I have picked up have been because I sort of followed a rabbit hole, right? I guess I will include a tiny disclaimer, right? If you don't care about a warrior rune, don't worry about it. So here's what happened. I'm playing with a couple of people, right? I'm playing with a bunch of friends of the cast, right? Like Lou, Rahe, right? The runes and the rune system, a lot of the time it'll just like start with like an out of the ordinary breadcrumb that you don't recognize. Because one of the things that's crazy about World of Warcraft is like we've been doing this content for, I have quested through Elwyn Forest a million times. I know it's in the Fargo Deep Mine. I know it's in the Django Lode, right? The runes create a disrupting piece to that because they create this extra thing that I'm not prepared for, right? Which is what is, you know, fun and engaging about it. And so what ended up happening, we were going through Westfall. We get out of Elwyn Forest, we go to Westfall. In Westfall, I kill a Murloc. We're just like on the top coast of Westfall. There's some Murlocs there, and I happen to kill one. And a hammer drops. And the hammer is called Gilsbane. And it has the flavor text, can sometimes trap the souls of slain Murloc. And I was like, what the fuck is this? Okay, so we equip Gilsbane. And then we go and we start killing Murlocs. And nothing's happening at first. And you're just like, okay, is there like another piece of this? Do I have to like look around to click something? But then eventually I kill a Murloc. Oh, and what's this in my inventory? Soul of the Sea, right? This other thing. It's a little gem, right? And it has a use effect. I can click it and it highlights my cursor and I can use it on stuff. And I'm just clicking stuff to try and use it to see if it'll work with anything, but nothing works. It always fizzles, right? And I'm just like, man, like what the fuck is this Soul of the Sea? Okay, fast forward a whole bunch of time. I just have this sitting in my inventory and I'm thinking about it. I'm just like, I really wonder what else kind of happens here. We're doing some other quests along the coast, and all of a sudden, in party chat, Lou types in all caps, Baird, come over here, right? And I walk over and there's this statue that I've never seen before, right? That is called Idol of the Sea. And it's a statue and I can like mouse over it, right? And I walk up to it and I take the Soul of the Sea and I activate it and I use it on the Idol of the Sea and it spawns a level 20, essentially rare, but not quite a rare. Really, we would say that in modern terms, like a level 20 like mob, and I kill that mob and I get a rune out of killing that. It's like, this is the stuff, and it's so cool, right? There's obviously 12 different runes, and there's just like a bunch of them that you find in different sorts of ways. And I was just like, I was having the time of my life, basically all weekend, going hard on this stuff. We did a bunch of very classic, you know, WoW nostalgia stuff. We did Dead Mines, which was very hard because we did it super underleveled. I was, you know, like I was tanking, I was barely getting any rage for Thunderclap, all this other sort of stuff. We ended up trying to do SFK, Shadowfang Keep, which ended up being insanely hard because Shadowfang Keep is a, I don't know, it's just like a dungeon that's like up there or whatever. But I'm level 22 now. We're going through the whole process. It's been, this is WoW Classic. It's been super fun. So yeah.
Do you see yourself sticking with it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably gonna end up playing for the next couple of weeks because I really want to do the raid. And the other thing is that they've essentially promised that the level cap is going to increase over time, right? So right now it's 25, which has a really interesting effect where like a dungeon like the Dead Mines is an end game dungeon for WoW Season of Discovery, right? Which is not really, you know, like that's not really like happening. A dungeon like Shadowfang Keep is an end game dungeon, right? You can get best in slot, quote unquote, gear going into the raid by farming Shadowfang Keep, that kind of a thing. And I don't know, that's very fun. It's very like unique and stuff like that. And I've just been having, I don't know, I've just been having a good time. My goal is to clear the raid, right? See all of, you know, Black Fathom Deeps kind of beginning to end. And then I'll probably come back whenever they release the next update to the level cap. Where basically it's all but confirmed they are adding a new set of runes for a new armor slot. So there will be a 4th rune, right? The level cap will be increased to 40, and there will be a new raid, which is Gnome Rig. So all that.
Is there anything
Do you
that
have
you get?
do you have any interest in any of this?
Maybe. Like, like, do you get anything for retail out of it? Like, you get like Mog or anything out of it? No.
Yeah, I wish they would never do that, but I wish.
You don't think they'd ever do that?
I don't. They'll do it with like bundles and stuff. Like when you know, for the Cataclysm bundle, you can get a special mount, like a mount, basically. But I don't think that. I to be fair, I would like them to. One of the things I've always sort of wanted, or I would want, is my stuff in Classic to kind of collections wise translate to retail, right?
Yeah. No.
So for instance,
I'm surprised
like,
it's not the case, right? Like that feels like a no brainer, right? Like,
yeah, like the example I would use is specifically around content that's cut, right? So for instance, you know, there's a lot of appearances in old Classic that got kind of overwritten because of how Cataclysm worked. And they're, you know, like they're no longer right. It would be nice if those could get, you know, translated sort of over. Another good example would be Mists of Pandaria, the Mists of Pandaria legendary cloak quest line. You know, I never did that quest line because I didn't play very much in Pandaria. And so you know, a version of things where I play a bunch of Mists of Pandaria Classic and rating Pandaria Classic, and you know, that translates to the, you know, the legendary quote, the legendary cloak questline rewards getting kind of like updated, right? Like now all of a sudden I have the cloak transmog retail. That,
yeah, you know what? Like I said, I'm surprised that's not the case already. That seems like it should be.
yeah, I'm really interested to see how far they go. There are some changes already planned for Cataclysm. It's like, you know, Era server, right? The where they add in like the new kind of expansion. But we're now getting out of the golden age, right? The golden age of WoW is that, you know, classic TBC Wrath of the Lich King. And I could see people make real arguments that you're going to fundamentally change aspects of this game, right? And in the future, right, like I feel like it's going to end up, right, like when I think of modern expansions, Legion, Battle for Azeroth, you know, Shadowlands, right? There are so many features in there that are widely hated, right? Are they going to change the way that those features interact on launch? Maybe, we'll see. You know, like you can imagine a version of Shadowlands Classic that where like you can just swap covenants from day one.
Yeah, no, I could also like, you know, imagine a version of this where like, you know, they just like, you know, if Season of Discovery is super successful, they just like make like, you know, a divergent timeline essentially. It's more classic, like, right? Like I could see that being popular, right?
Yeah, Season of Discovery has been insanely successful. At least to my, you know, at least to my understanding and my knowledge. Like if I were to go to Twitch right now, let me just like take a look. Yeah, World of Warcraft is in the top 5, right? And these are all Season of Discovery players. Shroud is playing. Oh, actually, Max is up there. Liquid Max, he's playing obviously. He's playing retail, right? But I don't know. Just like it seems like most of these folks are playing playing Season of Discovery for Classic. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. No, I'm just curious to see what happens with it. Just because like I could also see it being like a testing ground. Like I could see that rune stuff coming over and like, you know, that tech being used in retail somehow, right? Like, I know you had mentioned before that like there was some like are the runes that like enable like, you know, like I think you said there was like a like a fundamentally different type of spec on certain classes or something like that?
Yep,
Well,
correct. So for instance, warlocks, rogues, and shaman all have tanking specs that are activated by using a specific. So warlocks, the famous one is warlocks have a metamorphosis, right, which turns them into sort of the meta form, and they then become melee tanks,
oh, so they're basically
which
like
is
druids, but
yeah,
warlock form. Yeah, very
yeah.
cool.
And so just with one rune, you can make warlock tank, which folks have been pretty excited about, I guess. Um, I have yet to see any of that just because we've been discovering the runes without, without spoilers,
Right.
basically. And so I've been tanking for my intention is to swap over to arms, right? Like a two-handed sort of arms build, which has never really been possible for a variety of reasons. It's just, I don't know, stuff like that. I'm excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Um, yeah. On my end, I played a tiny bit of the new Diablo season. I guess it's midway through at this point. It's like mid-January. Um, there's some cool stuff there. I could see myself getting into it if I cared enough. I rolled a druid just because. I don't think I'll go back to it though. But they released the Street Fighter's costume 3 for all the main cast. And a lot of them are really good bangers. I would encourage people to look them up. Of course, my boy Zangief gets like a suit. And it's like it's supposed to be like it's supposed to be people like in their not normal times, like reuse, like wearing like hangout clothes. And Zangief is like when he's like reading in his study or whatever.
I'm seeing it now, actually. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, no, I am so excited for I'm actually after this going to go buy all of that because I have not been home. But like Marissa got her wedding dress costume. Manon got like a really nice like almost Napoleonic looking soldier's costume.
Mm-hmm.
People are saying that Lily's costume, which has like a sombrero, is like should have been her default because her like basic one makes her look like a little kid and it's a little bit weird. She's got like big ponytails. Um, but people are people are very satisfied with these costumes. I think the only one people don't like maybe is Luke's, and that's just because it's kind of like his old Street Fighter V costume.
I don't know who Luke is in Street Fighter.
So Luke came in at the end of Street Fighter V, and the idea is he is like the new Ryu. Of course, this didn't work because Ryu is always the Ryu, but he's supposed to be like the new face, right? Him and Jamie are supposed to be the new Ryu and Ken, and kind of like Spirit, right? Like they're the next generation.
Okay.
But because he's like supposed to be like kind of the new face of the series, he gets a lot of attention. He's also fairly good, like he's fairly meta. He's a fairly good pick. I think at this point, I think the commonly thought top of the tier list right now are Ken and Luke. Ken's got like a lot like I wouldn't say his execution's easy, but he's got a lot of like tools that like link together very easily. Luke, I think, is just kind of like all around strong. Whereas like who I play Zangief is generally considered to be relatively low tier just because he doesn't have great anti-air tools, stuff like that. And like especially like on launch, his super one, which is an anti-air super, like would whiff all the time, even in places where you'd think it wouldn't. But that is neither here nor there. I will always play Zangief just because that's the kind of style I play. I like.
It's funny. I actually did end up playing a bunch of a fighting game this week.
Which one?
Called Smack Studio. Have you ever heard of Smack Studio?
No.
Smack Studio is a platformer fighter. That is like Smash Brothers. But the interesting thing about Smack Studio is they have a character builder, where you can upload your own sprite sheet. And create your own sort of Smash character with like an up special, down special, stuff like that. And then they have integrated Steam Workshop support that includes, all of these like extra characters. Is this actually also like maybe an interesting legal question? And I ended up playing Smack Studio with a couple of people where like they have some like standard characters, but then we went to workshop and we started, like playing with like the workshop made characters. I played Goku. Somebody played a Zigzagoon. But the interesting one was somebody played an Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones has a revolver, and he it does so much. It's like max damage. It's like a one-hit kill basically. He has a 6-shot revolver. And so you shoot somebody with your revolver and you basically like auto win. And it's just it was a very interesting experience. I don't know. I'd be interested to see, you know, what you by taking a look at Smack Studio.
Have you ever heard of what's it called? What is the name of it? It's basically a game. It's a fighting game. It's very much like this. Salty Bet is built on top of that. Salty Bet.
Yes. No, I know what you're talking about. Mugen?
Yeah, Mugen. That's it.
Mugen?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
A very similar sounding thing, right? Where like, you know, people built their own characters. And it is kind of up to you to like not download a bunch of busted characters, right? Like, you know, in the game. Because like they have there's some cool stuff there, right? There's like, I think like there's like a killer whale pack, and like the whale just like sits below the surface and you hit a button and it like pops up and like murders people, right? It's very hard to kill, but like, you know, you're just basically on your own to like not make the game terrible for yourself. It feels like this is the same thing here, which is yeah, you know,
the copyright thing is what I find really interesting about this. Is like you know, there's obviously all these licensed characters in like the Steam Workshop, right? You know, Goku and like Pikachu and stuff like that. But like, what's the liability there? It's got to be on the Workshop mod author, right? It's not on like the game itself.
It's on, if this again is my it's probably on the author, but it's probably subject to the same takedown stuff that like you would normally be, right? Like I'm sure if Nintendo finds this, they will issue like 7,000 takedown notices, and Gabe will be like, okay, these are gone now, right? Because I think under Section 240 they would not be liable. Although there might be some sort of
because the platform is not liable for user-hosted content. That's what this would be.
User-generated content, typically.
I'm sorry, user-generated content. Yeah, obviously the content's hosted.
Yeah, on the condition that they act in a pretty timely fashion when informed about infringing content.
Yep. Oh, and you know what else I played actually this week? That I saw Charles, friend of the cast, Charles play is Foxhole. Have you heard about Foxhole?
I have not. Or rather, I have in that Charles told me to check it out, and I didn't. Why don't you tell me about it?
Okay, I have Foxhole, and I played a little bit of it, just to fuck around. I was like, oh god, I could go really deep on this game. Because it's like a permanent world, like war state or whatever in like World War II kind of like era tech. And I just sort of spawned in, I got a gun, I like walked forward, and then I just like came across like essentially a battalion of other guys, and the voice is like proximity based. So I was like listening to this guy in a tank giving orders to the infantry surrounding, and I just kind of fell in line and I started like following these orders. I fought in a battle. We all died because we had one tank, the other side had three. It was just like, it was incredible. And I was just like, oh my God, if I did this, like I was just doing this alone. I didn't know any of these people, but like I immediately imagined, like getting into a Discord server, having somebody be like, you know, like do this thing or whatever. So anyway, this is a future podcast episode waiting to happen. Okay, Charles introduces us to Foxhole or something, or we just decide to play together or whatever. I don't know. It is very, very good ground to just mine content. I think I really want to figure this game out.
Interesting. Is it what's it called? Is it is it first person?
No, it's isometric.
Okay, I was gonna say it looked isometric, but like the way you were talking about it, I wasn't sure if it was like, you know, like Savage, where like one person was drawn out and everybody else was.
Yeah, it's essentially. Do you know what
I own Foxhole.
Is? Oh, you do?
Yeah. This is
we should talk to Charles about like setting like because I'm sure he has like a guild or a clan or something. And that's the thing I feel like was missing from my like Foxhole night. Was I wasn't connected, like I didn't join a Discord or anything like that. Nobody even like advertised for it, right? And I really had no idea what it was doing.
See, the thing is I feel like you're talking about like proximity chat. I feel like you kind of don't want to do Discord. I think you want to like. I feel like the purest version of this is keeping it in game, right? But I see what you're saying.
Well, so yeah, the thing is that I just didn't understand a lot of like the mechanics, right? Like I
Right.
didn't really understand like what I was sort of for. The best I could do is figure out. I spawned in a base that had a lot of supplies, and I spawned in a base. The base had a ton of supplies in it, and I picked up some of the supplies. Essentially, went to the. But the process of setting up those supply lines is also something that is player content, right? So, for instance, in owned territory, like in territory you owned, you can mine iron ore, refine it into steel, put that steel in a factory to spit out a tank, and then deliver those tanks to the front line. And it's like that's the stuff I feel like I would need a Discord to understand, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like the other pieces of outside of just being a grunt, right? Kind of like on the ground. Yeah, anyway, that stuff was crazy. They apparently have naval warfare now, which I'm obviously into for a fucking, for doomed boat reasons. And I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, that's Foxhole. If you ever want to do Foxhole shenanigans, let's figure it out.
Makes sense. All right.
Yep.
Well, I was afraid we weren't gonna be able to fill this episode, but we're over time, so I think we should.
True.
I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
If you'd like to email us about any of the stuff we talked about in this podcast, you can email us at derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. You can follow us twitch.tv/derpsgames or youtube.com/derpsgames. These go out live. Rate reviews wherever you find podcasts. All the links are in the description. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
I have nothing that I am, looking to promote.
Well, in that case, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.